Hi, Dr. Patrick Gentempo here, back with you again. We're in the studio again. Even though the whole set has been broken down, we have more to give you, and we're really excited to bring this to you. So enjoy. The existence of Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, is not really validated. What would you say to that?
Well, I think the charge would be uninformed in light of the archaeological and literary evidence that supports him existing in the first century as a real individual. Mm-hmm. First of all, there has been limited archaeological excavation in Jesus' hometown of Nazareth. Mm-hmm. In fact, today you can go to a village of Nazareth that's reconstructed in a first century type. You can eat the food they ate, you can dress like them, you can see how everyday life worked. Mm-hmm. They base this on the archaeological study they've done in the area. So really there's no credible individual today that would say that Nazareth never existed, the hometown of Jesus. Mm-hmm. But if you look into the literary background supporting Jesus' existence, you find almost a dozen lines of evidence that converge to refer to, make mention of Jesus Christ himself. And some of those come from non-Christian historians, such as Pliny the Younger, mm-hmm. Lucian, mm-hmm. Phlegon, Thallus, Josephus, the Jewish historian. You find that they make mention of Jesus as a real historical person. Nobody calls him a myth. And what you find is when you read some of these, for example, Thallus made mention of the darkness that covered the land during the time of the crucifixion. Mm-hmm. And even though Thallus's works don't exist today, we know his works through Julius Africanus. And what Julius tells us is that Thallus believed that the darkness that came over the land on the day of crucifixion wasn't due to some cosmic or divine disturbance. It was actually due to a solar eclipse. Mm-hmm. But Julius remarkably responds to this by saying there can't be a solar eclipse on the day that Jesus died, astronomically. Mm. It just doesn't work that way. It can't happen the way that Julius says. But there's Josephus making mention to Jesus and John the Baptist and other biblical figures as well. You have what you call the Teledoth Jesu, which is a 5th century AD non-Christian document critical to Christianity that argues that the disciples stole the body of Jesus, but nevertheless making mention to the Messiah, to Jesus mm-hmm. himself. So the more and more we get into the literary aspects, we find that Jesus is documented everywhere. In fact, in the Roman historians, such as Tacitus, Jesus is mentioned along with Pontius Pilate and the explosion of Christianity that ended up exploding in Rome and taking over the city. When you turn to the archaeological evidence, it's a little more sparse. Mm-hmm. But recently, in 2002, there was an ossuary discovered with Jesus' name on it. Mm-hmm. Now, the ossuary didn't belong to Jesus. We know he rose from the dead. Mm-hmm. And an ossuary is just a simple 18-inch long, 1 foot high bone box where they would take the deceased's bones, put them into this box, put their name on it on occasion, and then put it in the family tomb. Mm-hmm. Well, Oded Galan, who's an antiquities dealer in Jerusalem, had a bone box, an ossuary, that said, James, the son of Joseph, the brother of Jesus, on the side of it in the Aramaic language. Mm. Well, this sparked a whole court case in Israel that lasted years. They called over 50 expert witnesses to analyze the bone box and the inscription to see if it was authentic and so forth. They were charging Oded Galan, the owner of the box, with forgery and so forth. They ended up, after years of analyzing this box, with multiple expert witnesses, there was no good reason to say that the inscription was a forgery. There was no doubt it was a first century bone box. But when you get inscriptions like that, it's almost too good to be true. Yeah. Well, it ended up becoming authenticated based on this court case. And this box stands as the earliest witness to Jesus and his family that we have from the archaeological record. Dates to the first century, names his brother James, his father Joseph, and if you have a famous brother, you add the brother onto the bone box. Of course, Jesus was that famous brother. So the bone box really stood out as a first century witness of Jesus and his family.
Yeah, so I guess in summarizing, you've got corroboration across a wide variety of people, a wide variety of sources, all attesting to the fact that Jesus of Nazareth existed.
Yes, absolutely. And if you want to even go deeper, you can look at the graffiti in the first century and find references to Jesus. In fact, one of the more popular points of graffiti is the Alexamenos graffiti. Mm-hmm. And what it has or depicts is Alexamenos, a Christian, mm-hmm. who is being made fun of in this drawing, this piece of graffiti that had Jesus on the cross, and they drew a donkey's head on Jesus. Mm. So they were making fun of Jesus, and they were ridiculing the Christian Alexamenos on the time. But you have a Christian worshiping a man who was killed on the cross. That is something that perfectly corroborates the Gospels.
Wow. So all that evidence exists for the existence of Jesus. Now, since we're segueing, he's the graffiti, he has him on a cross. You've made some mention about the resurrection and some of the logic and evidence to support it. Can you dig a little deeper there?
Sure. The resurrection is one of the most well-attested facts of ancient history. And I say that because there are so many eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ that what do you do with them all? We have so many witnesses, we don't know what to do with them. We have 500 eyewitnesses mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15 by the Apostle Paul. He said 250 of them were alive at the time he was writing the epistle. Mm-hmm. You have nearly a dozen appearances, physical appearances, of Jesus to both the disciples, to both believers and unbelievers. Mm-hmm. People might respond and say, well, these were just believers who saw Jesus alive and touched him. Well, no, he appeared to the Apostle Paul, knocked him off his horse in Acts chapter 9, who was an unbeliever, putting Christians in prison and persecuting the Christian church. Mm-hmm. What about doubting Thomas in John chapter 20? He was a doubter. He was somebody who was skeptical, maybe a materialist, if you will. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm not going to believe until I touch him. And Jesus appeared and gave him the evidence of his resurrected body and said, Thomas, please touch me if you'd like. I'm here. And then what did Thomas do? He was so convinced, he fell down. And in the Greek text, it says, he said, the Lord of me and the God of me. In the English text, obviously, it was my Lord and my God. And he wasn't taking the Lord's name in vain. Mm-hmm. Jews don't do that. So whenever we see these appearances, it just continues to validate there was a physical bodily resurrection that occurred. And then he even ate food to prove to them that it was the real Jesus. Mm-hmm. You know, in Luke 24, he ate a piece of broiled fish. And in John chapter 21, he cooked a morning breakfast and ate with the disciples there on the seashore of Galilee. So the more we look at the evidence that supports the resurrected Christ, the empty tomb, the hundreds of eyewitnesses, the multiple times in which he was seen and touched and handled, the times that he ate, the times that he said, it is I, myself, handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. Mm-hmm. He invited himself to be touched. What greater pieces of evidence can you possibly have to corroborate a person coming back to life? This wasn't something done in a vacuum. It was done in the very city that the message of the resurrection was declared. If you wanted to preach the resurrection and it didn't really happen, you don't do it in the very city you said it happened. Right. Because there's too many people that will call them out on a lie.
That's great. Joseph, I really appreciate you spending all this time and sharing all your knowledge and experience with us. And I know you've written 5 books, and I appreciate the gift of one that you just gave me upon my arrival here. Are there any more books in your future?
Yes, actually, Harvest House Publishers have just asked me to be the general editor on the Harvest Handbook of Christian Apologetics, due to be released in 2018.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we look forward to getting that one. And I just appreciate you spending time and sharing this wisdom with me and with this audience that's going to be watching this series. And I wish you well on your continued endeavors.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you. That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.